Hey, it's Jack for the Online Real Estate Academy, and I want to bring you up to date on the Board of Registration deliberations relative to the relationship disclosure. They're considering changing the relationship disclosure in some way relative to 2 points. First, the relationship disclosure is currently required to be used at the first personal meeting. And 2, there seems to be discussion at the board of whether or not this form is required for commercial real estate. And let's take item number 2 first. It's easier to dispense. The board is opening a regulatory review to decide whether or not this form will be subject or be required to be used in commercial real estate. Now let's get back to point number 1. When do you have to use this form? Before the virus, and even now since the virus, even more so, there are more and more virtual relationships between licensees and clients. And because of that, there are some times where there is no first personal meeting. It never happens. In fact, for a long time, I've had a number of these clients myself, mostly landlords who own property. They got referred by another landlord, and I've never met them in person. We might have a really strong phone call relationship, and maybe they've even seen my videos, but I've never seen them in person. In fact, I just sold somebody's house where I had rented it out 3 times previous to that, and I never met this person until 2 days before we sold the property. I met him at the property for the first time ever, even though we've been broker and client for like 4 years or something like that. He lives far, far away, and this is the one time he was ever in Massachusetts, so I met him in person for the first time 2 days before we sold the house. Here's the guidance on the form, as I want to give it to you at this point. Should you have a virtual relationship with one of your clients relative to the relationship disclosure? If you're working with a buyer, you should have this form signed no later than the right to represent agreement is being signed. If you're not using a right to represent agreement, you should have this form signed no later than an offer being signed. If you're working with a seller, you should have this form signed no later than completing the listing agreement. Now, let's remember, some of those things and some client licensee situations may not exist. You may never write up an offer. You may never write up a listing agreement. A listing agreement is not required by law. It is required by the multiple listing service, but not necessarily required by law. However, the guidance I just reviewed for you should be applicable for the vast majority of relationships that you have with your client. Again, with the buyer, no later than the right to represent agreement, or if you don't have one of those, no later than the offer. With a seller, no later than the listing agreement. Stay tuned on that. I'm sure the board will clarify, but going forward, that's probably pretty conservative advice. You're better off being safer than sorry, of course. So they will update this ongoing. We'll give you more information as that develops. Hey, thanks for watching. I'm Jack Gately.